All right, let's dive into a really fascinating story about a PR crisis that just completely spiraled out of control. We're looking at Ola Electric, a company that came in with this huge promise of a revolution, but, well, they ended up giving us a masterclass in what not to do when everything starts to go wrong.
So if you want to understand the Ola Electric story, it really comes down to this massive conflict. On one hand, you've got the promise, right? This sleek, futuristic, high-tech mobility revolution. And then on the other hand, you have the reality. The terrifying viral videos of those very same scooters just bursting into flames. That huge gap between what was promised and what was delivered, that's what we're going to unpack.
To really get why this crisis was so damaging, you first have to understand the hype. And I'm not kidding. When Ola Electric launched, the expectations were absolutely through the roof. See, this wasn't just about selling another scooter. Not at all. They were selling a vision of the future, all wrapped up in cutting-edge tech and backed by a ton of investment money. The promise was that they were going to completely change how we move around our cities. And you know what? People bought it. Hook, line, and sinker.
But, almost as quickly as the company shot up on all that hype, some really serious problems started to pop up. All those slick marketing promises, they were starting to crash head-on into the harsh reality of their manufacturing and their service.
And just look at how fast things went south. This wasn't just one bad day or one bad incident. It was like this constant drumbeat of failure. First, the fires. Then, reports of the front suspension just snapping. After that, these bizarre software glitches that made the scooters suddenly reverse at full speed. It just kept getting worse, until finally the government had to step in.
So you see, it really was the perfect storm. I mean, the product safety issues alone were a complete nightmare. But then you add a total service meltdown on top of it. Customers had these broken, sometimes dangerous scooters, and they had literally no one to turn to for help. So is it any surprise that social media just exploded with fear and frustration? That's what forced the regulators to finally take notice.
Okay, so here's where it gets really crucial. All those product failures were bad, right? But it was the company's communication, their response, that made everything a million times worse. Instead of putting out the fire, they basically showed up with a flamethrower. Yeah, instead of taking any kind of ownership, their response was just a textbook example of what not to do. They were defensive, blaming external factors, or, get this, even their own customers, all while they kept pushing this super aggressive marketing that just felt completely tone deaf. And that dismissive, arrogant attitude, it came straight from the top.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It's such a core lesson in crisis management. The tone is always set by leadership. When the person in charge sounds arrogant during a crisis, it's not just bad PR. It's actively telling your customers that you don't care, and it destroys any chance of winning them back.
Okay, so let's flip this around. Given everything that went wrong, what should they have done? This is probably the most valuable part of this whole story, because it gives us a clear playbook for how to handle a crisis the right way. This is the what could have been for Ola. And here's the key takeaway. The second that first fire was reported, a plan just like this should have kicked into high gear. The goal is simple. Be fast, be transparent, and put customer safety above absolutely everything else. You need one single empathetic voice to get out there, acknowledge the problem, tell people how to stay safe, and just stop any blame games until you have the facts. I mean, just listen to the words in a statement like this. Urgency, transparency, safety is our absolute top priority. This is what real, immediate, empathetic ownership sounds like. No, it doesn't magically fix the scooter, but it's the very first step to start fixing that broken trust.
So at the end of the day, the lessons from Ola's mess really apply to any company out there. First off, your product has to actually live up to your marketing hype. Second, transparency is the only currency that builds trust. Being defensive just burns it to the ground. And finally, no amount of fancy PR is going to fix a broken product. You have to actually solve the problem.
And that leaves us with one final big question. For a brand that broke its most fundamental promise, the promise of safety, can that trust ever truly be rebuilt? What does that road back from a crisis this huge actually look like? It's a question every single company should be asking themselves.